Chapter 32. Dragon's Blood. Lance giggled as Hoplite downed another pitcher of wine, the man's head swaying to and fro as he set the container back down with a gasp. The man had practically drowned himself with how long he'd been chugging. Thankfully, Hoplite had the gigantic lungs necessary for such a feat. The rude table before them was strewn with all manner of emptied plates, with some piles of them stacked as high as Lance was tall. An impromptu eating contest had taken place between Hoplite and 10 elf men, with Hoplite coming out as the victor. Lance, in her drunken haze, had taken note that Hoplite's cheeks had filled in quite a bit after the massive meal. He certainly hadn't been emaciated. His cheeks had not appeared all too hollow before the eating had begun, but now they were completely filled out, even bordering on the definition of chubby. It was hard to see, of course. Hoplite's face was still all hard planes and sharp angles, even with the added fat. How had he put on weight so quickly? There had hardly been any time for Hoplite to properly digest the food he'd eaten. Then again, something similar happened after he had defeated the Pillarborn. His cheeks had looked deathly hollow then, up until he devoured that rabbit. An unpleasant memory, one she'd like to forget. Lance forcefully turned her thoughts from that, instead focusing on Hoplite's bright smile. Bloody and stuck with torn gray fur, the sound of crunching bones still echoing in her ears. She shook her head and took a deep, shaking breath. Lance thought that she had gotten over it after she allowed Hoplite to spin her about, but there were still echoes of fear deep within her, it seemed. There was a solution for this, however. She took a long swig of Akandari whiskey, not bothering to pour it out of the large bottle it came in, and instead opting to simply down it straight out of the container. Lance heard several nearby elves chastising her for such a disgusting act. Well, none of them had made a peep while watching Hoplite drink straight out of the pitchers, so Lance couldn't bring herself to care. The night's drinking had also helped Lance shed regard for her fellow elf. It wasn't her fault they didn't get their spit on the bottle first. Akandari whiskey was a powerful form of drink, often enough to put down smaller elves than she with a single sip. Perhaps chugging half of it in one go wasn't the wisest decision she could have made. She was a goddess of drink. Nothing could stop her from not caring. What has she been doing? Oh, yeah. A hopslide, Lance shouted mightily. Yeah, has to try this whiskey. It'll put hair on your head. He lazily turned his head toward her, his eyes on the brink of shutting, perhaps for the next decade with how puffy his eyes had become. Those tired, heavy eyes spotted the bottle, and Hoplite merrily gestured for it with a lazy hand. Lance didn't hesitate as she approached her large buddy, proffering the bottle to Hoplite with an encouraging smile. Hoplite then took the bottle and knocked it back in a single long chug. The surrounding elves gasped in horror as their eyes finally found the label of the bottle. Lance, in a moment of clarity, thought about how awful her hangover was going to be if she didn't drink any water. In fact, it might be a good idea to hold off drinking any more tonight. The whiskey she had downed was enough to put down an orc twice her size, but that didn't mean it wouldn't give her a brain-splitting headache later. Since she wouldn't have to sleep tonight, she would just prioritize drinking water throughout the rest of the festivities. Thank the pillar she had the strongest liver on Arculus, otherwise all this drinking might have killed her. Lance knew other elves wouldn't have been able to drink half as much as she had tonight. Not even Moreau had been able to beat her at a drinking contest, no matter how hard he had tried. Moreau had been proud that he had crafted Lance into one of the best watchers in the Feywood, but he had been somewhat spiteful that Lance was capable of outdrinking him. So they would get together to drink, twice a year for about 100 years. Out of every single one of those contests, Moreau had not won a single time. The last contest Lance and Moreau had before his final rest ended hilariously. When Moreau was at his drunkest, Lance had convinced him that it would be a fantastic idea to twin braid his hair. She had told him about the advantages of such a hairstyle, such as how it would collect his hair into 2 shorter lengths rather than one long one. The other advantages, she told him, were just, well, she couldn't quite remember. Lance had been quite drunk, of course. The end result was Moreau with his hair in childish pigtails, both curlishly hanging down the sides of his head. Lance had gone out of her way to find a pair of colorful pink ribbons, tying them into Moreau's black hair. Moreau, in his newfound confidence, apparently believed that he would be able to finally win the Harkmother's hand in marriage with his luscious pigtails. He was then ordered by the Harkmother to keep that hairstyle for an entire day, which Moreau had done without a complaint. Lance knew that inside, though, Moreau was absolutely seething. any elf that looked into his eyes could have seen that emotion burning like hot coals. It was absolutely hilarious. To her, anyway. Murrow had ordered her to never convince him to do anything while drunk again. That would be a good store to share, actually.
Herplet,
Lance shouted right in the man's face.
can I tell you a story?
She asked, placing both hands on his shoulder blades to keep from falling down face first into the dirt at his feet. He merely grunted in affirmation, those tired golden eyes barely maintaining eye contact with her. Being up close like this, she was more easily able to read what lay behind Hoplite's gaze. The drunken haze had made it somewhat difficult for her to focus on his eyes, but now that they were basically nose to nose, she could see that he was happy. Anyway, frogs are quite fascinating. The yellow-barreled chested frog known as zysts are capable of emitting a glowing light from their eyes, Lena told Michael as she looked inside of his open mouth. Standard human teeth, she whispered to herself before continuing. It is unknown if the zyst emits this glow to ward off predators or to attract mates, but I have found that this glow can be triggered if a zyst is presented with alcohol. Michael replied, shifting his tongue away from Lena's finger. Have you had 3 sets of teeth in your lifetime so far? Or are you still growing out of your adolescent teeth? Lena asked, withdrawing her finger from Michael's mouth. His adolescent teeth? 3 sets in his lifetime? He wiped off his lips and spit into a nearby wine glass before replying. Nah, humans got 2 sets of teeth in their lives. Strange, Lena whispered to herself, her voice nearly inaudible over the drunken bustle of the party surrounding them. They had opted to retreat to the edge of the party, right at the end of one of the tables near the root wall. Michael had decided that it likely wasn't going to be an issue to let the elf girls play nurse on him. He wasn't comfortable with giving them his blood, though. Not that he was afraid of a little nick or anything. Besides, they said that just some spit and nails would be adequate. The procedure was only somewhat invasive, nothing intense, as they were still surrounded by a crowd of elves. Humans on Oculus have 3 sets of teeth in their lifetime. Baby teeth, a set for adolescence, and the final set for adulthood, Lena's sister Lenny told him, as she not so discreetly grabbed the wine glass Michael had spit in before putting it in a small sack. She looked almost exactly like her sister, to the point where Michael really was considering if the two were really twins after all. Michael and Lena had thankfully managed to find Lenny before she could locate Hoplite, a blessing considering how 37 may have reacted to Lenny's request. That's frickin' weird, Michael said with a shake of his head. He could hardly imagine what it would be like to have 3 sets of teeth throughout his life. Probably not that weird, really. Just a second set of baby teeth, right? He shook his head again, his skull feeling heavy as it swung to and fro. The drinking had been good, real good. He hadn't been this trash since before Earth fell, since he last saw his friends and comrades. He took a deep breath to steady his nerves. If he began crying now, he would not stop until he was sober again, which wouldn't be for a long time. Michael wanted to enjoy his drunkenness. He would not turn his current euphoria into a sob fest, especially not in front of strangers. From our perspective, it's strange that you only have 2 sets, Letty said as she pulled out a pair of tweezers from a knapsack. May I take a hair sample? Yeah, sure, Michael said, lifting his head to look at Lena. So how much longer is this going to take? Lena smirked. Not too much longer. Thank you again for allowing this examination, Michael. Especially considering how informal a request this was. Lenny nodded along with her sister's words as she plucked a stray hair from Michael's beard, wincing as the hair was yanked free from his face. They could have just asked him to take off his helmet. Getting his beard hair yanked wasn't pleasant. After Lenny pocketed the strand of Michael's beard, he stood, looming over both Lenny and Lena. His eyes had been getting heavier and heavier for hours now. Michael was on the verge of passing out, he realized. So much for being able to party all night. He hadn't even really done all that much partying, just eating and drinking. Michael supposed that the act of simply eating and drinking at a party could be considered partying, but it still felt like Michael had done nothing. Well, except get a quick exam from some elven eggheads. Maybe he could just crash for an hour or so. Can we finish this up? I need to take a nap. Michael yawned, rubbing his eyes with the palm of his gauntlet. Lena then placed a hand on Michael's chest plate and gave Michael a strange, hungry look. Michael blinked before looking back to Lenny, the other girl shaking her head and rolling those purple eyes of hers. I've gotten all the samples I need. Please enjoy the rest of your night, Lenny said with an annoyed huff, promptly turning away from the two of them to be reabsorbed into the shifting mass of elves. Michael then turned back to Lena, a small frown on his face. What's going on? Michael asked, attempting to hide the concern in his tone. Based on Lena's laugh, it was a pitiful attempt. There is one more thing to do, Michael. If you're willing to come with me, we can begin the endurance test, Lena continued, putting emphasis on the word endurance. You are quite a specimen. I think we will both enjoy the procedure, she said, that smirk deepening. Whoa, Michael blinked in surprise, completely caught off guard and unable to properly react when Lena grabbed his hand. What do you say? Lena asked as she leaned into him. He stuttered like an idiot. Michael wasn't used to being the one who was propositioned, and he certainly hadn't been expecting it from Lena. Unless maybe she was playing a prank on him of some kind. Yeah, that had to be it. She would lead Michael away with sweet words before making him jog around the root wall as an endurance test. That had to be it. Michael grinned, deciding to play along with the joke. He'd have her jog along with him when the time came. And if Lena didn't, he'd just go and pass out like he had planned. Show her to treat him like some kind of moron. Well, to be fair, he wasn't the sharpest crayon in the tool shed, and he was still capable of rational thought. While sober, anyhow. Sure thing. Always glad to show how fit I am, Michael said confidently. Lena's grin deepened, and she began leading him away from the party. And out of the root bowl. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you're new here, welcome aboard. Check out the description for the story and join the Discord if you'd like. Consider supporting the channel and the author as well. It's a dangerous world out there, but remember to be brave and look up to seek the stars.